Okay, let's get started. So after a little break, we are continuing with our media literacy workshop. So we have been talking about advertisements recently, and we have talked about how advertisements influence the way we think and how they use human psychology in order to create advertisements. We talked about commercials, which are advertisements based on video and audio formats. And also we talked about many different types of, let's say, influencing people through the means of advertisements. So today we will move back to the print media in the field of advertisement and print media in general. And you will be provided extra information on online advertisements today. So we'll basically talk about print media, its history, and why it's so important to us still. And also we will talk about online advertisements. So advertisements that we can locate, find, and reply to on online sources. Okay, first of all, print media. We have been talking a lot about print media, but in this session, we'll talk about print media in depth, which means that we will talk about the history of print media, we'll talk about the types of print media, and also we will discuss, compare, and contrast different types of print media. So printed media, which is shortened as print media for the purposes of media literacy. So printed media are materials used to inform, instruct, and motivate learners. Well, some materials may be used as learning aids. So we use printed materials every time. We use textbooks, we use handouts, we use other types of printed media. Well, it's essential for teaching, workshops, seminars, classroom use, and also it can be informative about products, just like printed advertisements that we talked about in the previous session, and etc. So this is all print media or printed media. Well, if you take a look at the history of printed media goes far back in time than any other type of media. In fact, that is the oldest form of media. So probably if we talk about media in general, the first type of media was printed one. It wasn't printed on a professional based on paper, just like we see it today. It was printed on different surfaces, starting from animal skins to stone and clay. So let's take a look at the history of it. So first of all, history of print media and written communication is as old as the civilization itself. So it's difficult to imagine civilized human societies without media because they have an urge to share, communicate, and of course to get in touch, which promoted the appearance of media. And the first type of media was, of course, printed media. So as long as 30,000 years BC, first humans started painting cave pictures. And can you imagine that it was one of the most ancient forms of media? If we take a look at it, it's definitely media. It's not art, maybe it is, but for the function it serves, it's media. So it informs people about what happened and how it happens. Maybe it was used as teaching for younger generations of early humans. So it is a type of media. In 1900s BC, Chinese independently developed their own style of writing. And then they started printing on clay, which was also early type of media. Also, many different examples can come all over the world. So as you can see, media is not a relatively new term. It dates back to the history of human civilization. Well, probably the most closer version of media, printed media, happened during the Roman era. So in year 59 BC, first earliest recorded newspaper was printed. It was not truly in a newspaper format, but it was an informative that aimed at giving information on what's happening in the Senate. So we can actually describe it as a newspaper. And regarding the printed press, so in its true meaning, It did not happen until 1447. Johann Gutenberg, that's a very famous name, so first person to start printed media or printed newspaper, who became the, let's say, founder of modern type of printed media. So now, because of this discovery or because of this invention, we have printed media that is distributed all over the world. So in what formats can printed media appear? Let's take a look. First of all, printed media is usually consisting of paper and ink, including newspapers, magazines, classifications, circulars, journals, yellow pages, billboards, posters, basically anything that can be printed upon. It's a medium that disseminates printed matter. And also all printed periodicals, newspapers, and others, they target special interest of the audience. So that's what makes them a medium for communication and sharing. Well, there are certain advantages, and I remember we talked about advantages and disadvantages, and we compared printed media to digital media, right? So we found many benefits and some shortcomings as well. In general, printed media is portable. It can be carried easily. It's easy to make. Well, if you have printing devices, then basically it's easier to create than most forms of digital media. It's cheap, it's relatively cheap, and of course, it's very common. It's still common among wide layers of society, not only old people, not only our granddad and grandmothers, but still we use printed materials every day on every aspect of our lives. Of course, when there are advantages, certainly there are disadvantages as well. One of the disadvantages is that it's too common. So it has become, let's say, cliche thing already because it's everywhere and it's still serving the same purpose. So basically, it's very common. Well, one of the shortcomings that printed media can deliver only information on a verbal level. It cannot communicate on visual level, on audio level, so it has only one channel to use in order to reach the audience. And of course, it's not updated on a frequent basis, not as frequently as social media or digital media, which makes it a little bit, let's say, behind than more modern forms of media. Now, books or textbooks, newspapers, newsletters, magazines, handouts, all types of printed materials that we use are regarded as printed media. So basically, everything that's printed and which has pictures, information, facts, and other stuff printed upon is considered as printed media. Take a look at the different types of printed media and their functions. Probably the most common forms are books or textbooks. Books are perhaps the oldest form and most common form of print media used by students. They used to be regarded as one of the greatest discoveries or inventions of human civilization. Of course, it's the source for knowledge and information. So books function for information provider, as a knowledge provider, and it's used as a teaching aid all over the world. Still, paper-based printed books are number one of usage for teaching purposes. And it can provide entertainment as well. All of us read novels, all of us read comics and other stuff in order to entertain ourselves. So those are the functions served by a type of printed media called books or textbooks. Next type is newspapers. Newspapers are probably a widely known type of printed media, and they're very popular. They can be published on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, and they cover a variety of topics. There are some newspapers that are related to only one field, for example, sport newspapers or only news and others. So newspapers provide information and they can provide entertainment as well. The main function of newspapers are providing information, building opinion, providing entertainment, and of course, advertisements. So they do advertise certain products and services. Newsletters. So some people might have a little confusion regarding the difference between newspapers and newsletters. In this regard, newsletters are used to provide information to selected readers only. And usually the coverage of newsletter is very narrow. It can be for a student body, it can be for a group of students, it can be only for one institution, and etc. So newsletters keep the readers informed of what's happening or what has happened in certain organizations. So school newsletters can be a good example. As you can see in the visual here, school newsletters can be in a printed form, in a typed form, and they inform certain groups about, let's say, activities happening in one organization. They basically function as information provider and community builder. Magazines. So magazines are also printed materials, type of print media. They provide information in various fields. Usually magazines come periodically, not quite frequently as newspapers. We have weekly magazines and monthly ones are very common. And they function as information provider, entertainment provider, and of course, they are greatest facilitators of advertisement. So they do advertise products, services, and lifestyles. So before going to the online advertisements, we now reviewed and took a deep look at what printed media can, let's say, provide and what's its history, what are the types of printed media, and in what ways we can use printed media in our lives. So basically with this, print, digital, online media types are covered in this month. We have talked a lot about types of media, and I'm sure that this introduction will be a foundation for you to continue on the next unit, which will be about bias, stereotyping. So in order to analyze those kind of issues in any type of media, you should have a deep knowledge of types of media, their purposes, their history, and of course about the circles that they serve. So with this, we basically summarize and finish up the part called media messages. And we talk in depth about bias, stereotyping, ruling the media, and other critical issues in upcoming sessions. So before continuing, we still have an English corner. Let's take a look at what is online advertisements and what are the purposes that they are serving. After this, we'll have a little in-session discussion, and then I will explain you your lead discussion.
Hello. In this video, we will discuss the features of online advertisements, as well as two unique features of advertising online: search histories and customer feedback. Understanding these 2 points will help you learn the role that you, the consumer, play in online advertising. It will also help you understand the techniques that advertisers use to attract your attention. There are many different types of online advertisements. Online ads may be similar to print advertisements because they only show pictures but no sounds, or they may be similar to television ads because they include videos which have sounds and movement. Therefore, depending on the specific online ad, you may see features from print ads such as different colors, images, slogans, and logos. You may also see features from television ads such as music, different voices, sound effects, jingles, and storytelling. Unlike print or television advertisements, when advertisers create online ads, they can use people's online search histories and customer feedback. A search history is the list of websites that a person has gone to recently. Let's think of an example. Pretend you have been looking to buy a new car. You spend the day looking at different car companies' websites, you do a Google search on new cars, then you decide to take a break and go to a clothing website on Facebook. You see advertisements for cars on the sides of the websites you're looking at. The car websites you looked at and the Google search you did influenced what ads you see later on these other websites. In addition to using search histories, online advertisers can also use customer feedback. Customer feedback is information that customers give to a company about a product. In other words, customers state what they like or do not like about a product. There are several different ways that customers can give customer feedback. Many times, customers are asked to give a certain number of stars to represent how much they like the product. The more stars, the better. Customers can often type their thoughts about the product as well. A newer and very popular way for customers to give feedback is through social media. Many companies now create a social media site to advertise their products and services. On such sites, advertisers can post information, pictures, and short videos about the product. Customers can show that they like a product or company by clicking on a like button or sharing the page with their friends. They can also type in comments they have, both positive and negative. Customer feedback is helpful to advertisers because if the feedback is good, the company can use those comments to advertise the product. If the feedback is not very good, the company can use those comments to improve the product. It makes you, as the consumer, an active participant in the advertising process.
Okay, so this video gave an insight into the challenges of online media, online advertisements in particular, and how we can deal with online advertisements. So let's discuss this further. Now, let me reshare the screen. Okay. Okay, so looking at different types of advertisements we have been discussing throughout this month, online advertisements are growing in popularity day by day. Probably they are taking over every, let's say, every shopping type. So if you talk about online advertisements now, probably they are the number one means of selling and buying because they are fast, they can select their audiences, and etc. Have you ever come across a situation that your search history is used against you? So you search for some item and then it keeps popping up on the next pages that you browse. Sometimes it even seems to me that you think about certain items or certain products and then it keeps appearing, which is even scary. So before we continue the discussion, let's hear from Navar. Have you ever had a situation when something that you have been searching for or something you didn't even search for kept appearing on your social media, on the websites as an advertisement, and how were the feelings for you? So, I mean, did you notice that your search history was used for you?
Yes, it happened once when I was looking on Pinterest some home decorations, and
Okay.
I even haven't thought about buying from them. I just was just surfing on the Pinterest, and but they impacted on my thinking because even when I entered the Instagram, when I entered the Facebook, and even on my email, I received discounts some home decoration companies are doing, and sometimes I dislike them. I send them message notification not to show or show less such items, but subconsciously they affected me to buy more items to decorate my home. And even as you have mentioned about thinking, even not searching from the um, social media, it appears, for example, at the beginning of study year, in September, I just thought about buying a new bag in the color of pink. And in my search history, there were any handbag uh, written search. And I don't know, from the Instagram, maybe they looked at me, my kind of likes on other products or on my friends' bags. I don't know. Maybe they and I was shocked how they are getting the idea that this in my mind, and maybe this is their data analytics of these kind of big companies are using even to predict an item or an idea before we actually thought about that things.
Okay,
And
thank you.
after this experience, I'm really into data analytics because they use real information to create the future. And yeah, I'm very amazed from this kind of advertisement.
Okay, thank you. Yes, as just you have mentioned, I'm sure that everyone has a personal experience of this. Online ads are very powerful because they exactly, let's say, fill the spots that you had in your mind. Well, maybe you liked only personal computers and you search for personal computers, then they analyze and they come to a conclusion. If you like personal computers, then probably you are interested into laptops as well. Then laptop advertisements keep appearing on your page. And then just like this, so they try to suggest the ways that products might interest you beforehand. That's a very, let's say, powerful thing. And we should really be careful about how it influences us, because if you already want something and it keeps appearing on your pages, you keep looking at it. So if you take a look, if you open that ad, it's already one impulse that more likely this ad will appear again, or similar ads will storm your pages because they work this way. As you can see, it's very, very powerful. It has new means of reaching the audience, and it usually can persuade you in various ways by finding the exact items you have been searching for, by offering you more choices, and of course, well, it's very much, let's say, impulsing on you because it keeps appearing even if you want it or you don't want it. So perhaps online ads are very powerful on this regard, because other types of advertisements, they usually deal with information and they predict the audience and target the audience. But online advertisements, they actually know about your history of search. So what you searched for, what you are looking for, what you are interested into. So that's why we have to be really careful about what we put on Google even, because it means that the information we are throwing into the ocean of this global network is being constantly analyzed and redirected towards us as services and advertisements. So the next thing is you have to always make sure that certain functions of your browser is turned off. For example, advertisements. If you can use, let's say, purchased applications, then it's better to use them rather than opting for free versions, because you will make yourself vulnerable for such online advertisements. They will be analyzing your search history without your consent. They will be finding out what you are looking for, what is interesting for you, and then they will suggest items, services, goods that might fit that interest. On one hand, it's very helpful. On the other hand, it's a little bit, let's say, problematic in terms of privacy, because you feel bothered as you're not safe in your searches. Well, anyway, it's one of the most popular ways of advertising, and millions of sources are spent on it, on analyzing, on predicting, and of course, on artificial intelligence that deals with all of it. And social media usually create huge databases and offer them to advertisers, which makes it more business than communication. So before we put anything into our search history, we have to be careful about the outcomes, and we have to make sure that we have confirmed versions of applications. We have, let's say, protected ourselves against spamming and other types of unwanted media messages by various ways. So always take it into consideration that advertisements now don't really wait for you to read them or to watch them. They can actually find a way to your social networks. They can find a way to your lives through the means of your browsing history. So that was basically our today's session summary. We reviewed print media and discussed print media in depth. And also we talked about online advertisements, which was the last type of advertisements in our list. So we talked about printed advertisements, we talked about digital advertisements, and today with online advertisements, we are finishing up this unit of advertisements. So at the end of every unit, you are expected to deliver a lead discussion and this week's lead discussion. So this week you will not write reflection, but you will be leading a discussion. You will be posting paragraphs discussing this question: how I receive and send media messages. So every day in our lives, we do receive and send media messages. So you're going to be analysts now. If you go to your cell phones, your phones have a service or a function that makes it available for you to analyze how many hours you spent on various applications, how many hours you spent on, let's say, searching for information on Google, or how much information you have served or you have downloaded. So please take a look at this data and then try to summarize how you mostly receive messages, how you mostly send messages. You can just try to count amount of short messages that you have sent, for example, for the duration of 1 week, and then take a look at the calls. How many minutes or hours of phone calls you made, and then how many hours you spent on social media. And then conclude. So what are your preferred ways of receiving media messages? And what are the preferred ways of sending media messages for you? How do you usually do it? And does it affect the way you carry out your daily functions? For example, does it interfere with your personal life, with your work, with your studies? And do you think that you have a right balance? So you don't really have to make it a big essay. Try to stick to 75, 120 word count, and just basically inform us about the types of media messages. I'm sure that you are informed on the types of media messages. If you forgot about them, go back to your reflections, take a look at your reflections, and you will sure find useful information. So it's printed messages, we have digital messages, we have advertisements, and many different things that we have been discussing starting from our very first session. So this time, you will be discussing the ways you receive and send media messages. You will post your paragraphs on Telegram, and I do hope that you will finish posting by next Thursday. Not this Thursday, but next week, next Thursday. And make sure that if you read an interesting discussion, if something applies to you, you can comment on each other's discussion posts. And so discussions are discussions, they should be discussed. You can ask questions from the person who posted a discussion. So I really want to see everything on our Telegram group. Well, if you have any questions regarding today's topic, on the discussion or on other issues, you are welcome to ask. You can ask now, you can ask later. Munawar, do you have a question?
I don't have a question, but one comment I have to the topic, and I'm really sorry that by telling several times that print media is for my granddad and grandma, I kind of created a stereotype that printed media or traditional media is for
Only
all ages.
newspapers. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I
Yes.
didn't mean to create this kind of stereotype, but this happens. Even I prefer to read paper version of scientific
Mhm.
articles because I want to do underline, I want to do highlight and
Mhm.
write notes. So this is very useful, and it is the traditional media can serve for better purposes of young users
Generation.
also.
Right.
Yeah, it was not my purpose to create a stereotype that traditional media is for all
I
old
see
aged people.
you were misled. Now you have understood and
Mhm.
made a different
Thank
conclusion
you.
for yourself, which means that
Mhm.
we are doing something right here. Thank you. Well, actually, I
Thank
also
you.
received some emails from some of you um, asking for feedback on their reflections. On the reflections, I noticed that mostly traditional media, especially when we talked about printed media, you regarded only newspapers and you thought and you replied, you reflected on terms of newspapers only. And that's why I added this piece of information just to make it known that printed media is more than newspapers or billboards. So yes, printed media is also very popular in various forms and various formats, and it serves different functions. It's great that you have learned important points from today's session and you are making comparisons from previous sessions, between previous sessions and today's session. For that, thank you very much. So I will be waiting for your lead discussions on Telegram and no reflections this week. Well, then have a nice week ahead. I will see you during the next session. Take a good care of yourselves.